스스로를 잘 돌보아야 할 많은 이유가 있습니다. 그러니까 이제 그런 얘기를 했어요.
What is the thing that can put me into the most safest place?
할 수 있는 것이 무엇일까? 이제 서양 사람들은
A lot of Westerners, they assume that they can protect themselves if they carry a gun.
그래서 자기 방어를 할 수 있다 이렇게 생각을 해요.
That is spoken on the basis of an enemy.
항상 뭐를 전제로 한 것이냐면
So whoever is my enemy, then you can shoot them to death and to become an enemy.
쏴 죽일 수 있다 그런 얘기고 또 적이 된다는 것은
Or to have an enemy. In most cases, rather than that person made me his enemy, I made him my enemy. So
내가 그 사람을 적으로 만든 것이거든요. 그래서
in terms of gun,
총이나 이제 그 문화를 이렇게 발전시켜 총 같은
under the idea of enemy and also the idea that I will win, a lot of foreign cultures have been developed. But from my opinion, there is a culture that has not been yet developed. Even in Korea, the matters related to the labor, it started from Western countries and it is not yet settled down in Korea, and it still causes a lot of problems.
서로가 적대시하는 관계에서 이제 시작된 거란 말이죠. 자본에 대해서 대항하기 위해서 노동이
It is an organization that has been made by proletariat in order to protect the capitalism.
조직이 이제 노동 조직이란 말이에요.
But protecting myself, in their opinion, when you strengthen our Labor Party, you feel you're protecting your stance. But when the organization of the labor strengthens, but your capitalist manpower loses its power, then your manpower or labor organization tends to fall behind. So two parties, they should always work together. They are not parties that you should attack each other and to have a win. It becomes very difficult for those in Korea, whether it's Labor Party or whether it is a person who has money, because you are under assumption that you want to win, and when you don't make enemies, that is, you put yourself in the best condition where you're taking the best care of yourself. When you had the war with Japan, Japan made a lot of mistakes. They did 100% mistake, but we also made great mistake that we underestimated Japan, and we call them monkeys. We assume that they have no manners and they have no respect for elders, and we just said they are those who doesn't know how to read and who doesn't have the manners on table, and they know nothing. We assume that they knew nothing, and that's why we suffer and we lost. And even nowadays, we have a tendency to believe that they are nothing, and there's something that we have to edit and make changes. There is a very bad habit of ours. There is a saying, the act of his might be the stance to decide whether it's right or wrong. But when he thinks of everything to harm and also to affect others, you can say the act is harmful, but you cannot say the person itself is evil. So you should try to change his karma, but you should not say he is a bad person.
하는 것이 기본이지 사람을 아예 그 사람은 100% 나쁜 사람이다 그렇게 말하지 말라고 말해요. 그러니까 우리는
But normally, when we say someone is bad or some party is bad, then we say they're 100% bad. For example, like North Korea, then how can you make changes to their life, or how can you have a rational idea of giving them good things or being good to them?
나를 가장 근원적으로
Not making enemies means you are doing a good deed.
내가 적을 만들지 않는데 적을 만들지 않는다는 것은 선행을 한다는 것이에요.
That's why we said throughout the centuries, monasteries, they don't need locks, they don't need gates. There is nothing to protect. Because in your previous life you have not stolen anything, then thieves will not come to your place.
훔친 바가 없으면 도둑이 들어오지 않을 겁니다. 도둑이 들어오지 않을 겁니다. 그러니까
So while protecting yourself, you also protect your life from not killing others,
보호하는 것도 살생하지 않는
and also your attempt to escape from hunger
내가 벗어나려고 하는 것도
or poorness.
남의 것을 훔치지 않고 남의 것을 뺏지 않고 내가
It also began from you, not being generous to others.
궁핍하게 살지
So we
부의 부분이 보호가 된다 그런 얘기예요. 그러니까 우리는
so we have right to be happy,
해야 될 내 스스로가 행복해야 될
and we also have attempt to become
내
happy.
스스로가 행복해지려고 하는 그 노력에 대한 의무가 있다.
So my attempts to become happy, it is not given by God or it is not given to you by your ancestors. It happens because of you and it arises because of you.
내가 전부 다 그렇게 만든 것이고 나에 의해서 전부
So you have to take care of yourself, and
할 수 있습니다. 그래서 스스로
but you also have to know how we have to take care of ourselves and also how we are going to study ourselves.
관심을 어떻게 탐구해 나갈지를 먼저
So we try to become happy, and also we know the potential that we can be happy and also our attempt to happy, all of them.
해야 된다는 당위성과 내가 행복해지고자 하는 노력을 하는 이런 모든 것들은
So without having the method to study how to become happy, there is no meaning to it.
방법론이 나올
So when we say we go to Seoul, we are really happy, or
그럼 우리가 서울을 가면 참 좋다라고 했을 때 또 우리가 일정을
if we assume that there is some other planet in this vast universe,
우주 공간의 어느
but if there is no other method to talk to them or to be able to contact them, then there is no meaning to it. There is no other meaning except the fact that there is some other living organism in this world. So when you study the Western philosophy, like Plato or Socrates,
우리가 서양 철학이나
when you study their philosophical ideas,
또는 그 소크라테스 이런 사람들의 그 철학
their emphasis, and when you study their emphasis, most of them might seem very valid, but there is no method given. After Renaissance, there were a lot of Western philosophers, but they have not really talked about method. They just give comments about how the world is, and of course there are some assumptions given by people, but those methods or those ways were not proper, and they has given us a lot of greed over time being. That's because they have no understanding of our human being. If you say, oh, ancestors gave us happiness and ancestors gave us good virtues and or even the evilness, then you should have a valid reason that they should be able to do it to you. You giving happiness to your children,
그 아이에게 행복을 줄 수 있는 것은 별로 그렇게 그 아이가 병에 걸렸을
is the same. Although you're able to give them uh, some conditions or some ideas about their happiness or their unhappiness, but you cannot control them in total. You can help them, but you know that you cannot control them, even if it's your child of your own bearing.
자유롭게 할 수 없다는 것을 알 수가 있어요. 자기가 난 자식임에도 불구하고.
So how am I going to protect myself, and how am I going to be not unhappy, or how would I be able to live a happy life? I often think,
살수 있을 것인가라는 것. 나는 이제 이런 생각을.
if you have a deep understanding of cause and effect and also samsara,
유대와 유대라는 것을 깊이 이해하면
then if I become a president, and
서로가
just like Chonduan, our previous president, if I kill a lot of people and if I harm a lot of people,
같은 대통령처럼 수많은 사람을 죽게 만들고
and
수많은 사람을 갖다가 다치게
if I have made a lot of people into misery,
갖다가 그 고통 속으로 몰아넣었다라고 했을 때 아 이제 내가 이 생에 뭐 많은 비난을
then I might, if I assume that maybe because I went to prison, all my bad deeds are done, but it is not so. Next life you are going to suffer more.
내 아들 큰 거라.
If, for example,
다음 생에 인과를 갖다 받는다 그러면 만약에
because the consequences of your actions and also choices are not given to you 100% in this life, it needs time to be time to receive them or to take them. And so if
가해자가
so there are also cases where the children of the victims, their sons and daughters are born and they might even kill you. But if you just look at the condition on its own, you might think that the person is a very bad person. But if you know the reason for it, then you know that this is an action that has been repeated because of his previous actions. And one person becomes murderer and the other person again becomes a murderer.
당한 사람이 되고
And in this way, it will form a life that causes the thousands of deaths.
이렇게 되면 수천 번을 죽고 사는 관계가 형성될 거란 말이에요.
So no matter how much you try to protect yourself, in this way you can never protect yourself. If I say something like this, then those people who doesn't know about Buddhism and those who doesn't believe in cause and the result and also who doesn't believe in reincarnation, they might say they don't believe it. But when they have killed Red Indians for thousands of people, they have all the black people, all the blacks, they have become the slaves. Red Indians, they never gave up. They all died. And they ran away to forest and they lived a life that was very futile, but they never gave up. They just died. They chose death. And Indians, Red Indians, they're very strong people. So over 200 years, more than 30,000 people died. And imagine those people, if they are working in the part where they are dealing with the American nuclear research, then think about it, how that would be. They have no idea about the cause and the effect. But although they are very intelligent and they believe in science, they don't believe in those moral ideology. So you assume that if you strengthen the CIA or FBI, then you might be able to stop it, but there's no way to stop it. That's why in our proverb we have a saying: those who achieve what they wanted with the sword, they fail because of their sword.
또 이를테면 땅에서 넘어진 자는 땅을 짚고 일어서라 그러죠. 그 얘기도 결국 뭐냐면 우리가 적어도
We achieve happiness through our good deeds, but we do not become happy just because we give up our efforts to be happy. So how we are going to look after ourselves, and
그래서 자신을 어떻게
how we are not
보호해야
going
될지,
to
내가
taste the
인과의 고통 매우
taste the
많거든.
cause and effect,
않고 지나갈 수 있을지 그 방법에
the
대해서
consequences. That's very important.
참 중요하다. 뭐 그런 얘기들은 우리가 뭐
You might assume that we can do
이렇게
things that brings us happiness, but in Buddhism we don't talk about those things that knows no concrete answers. Those farmers, if they want the sesame oil, then they plant the sesame, and if they want the beans, they plant the beans. So if you want happiness, you should plant the seeds of happiness. But without planting the seeds of happiness, and if you want happiness, that's not going to happen. So you should not think about those which are, which you should not think about the thoughts which are just like a foggy clouds. It's a very precise thing. 1 + 1 = 2. Whether blacks say is 1 + 1 is 2, and even the Caucasians, and also even the Israelis, they know 1 + 1 is 2. But even if knowing that if they shoot a cannons, then they should know that they should also be killed by the cannon. They do a lot of things, but they do a lot of wrong things. But why don't they know that it causes consequences? They do things that hurts them, and why don't they understand that it is the result of your action? That is very foolish idea and also act. And Yu Byung-on, who never believed in those cause and effects, he never believed in God too. But who knows if he had been killed or if he died on his own, and who knew that he would face this kind of consequence? What good does it do if you wear a jacket that is $10,000 worth, or what good is it if you drive a 5 million worth car? You die. I don't understand why you try to live a life in that way and you assume happiness or you expect happiness. That is very foolish thought. So you should not go behind it. If you chase them, then most of people who are also gathered around us are mostly of the same human being. So if you chase after them, and if you are behind them, then you are tend to go through the same suffering as they do. And those who doesn't believe in the cause and effect, then even if they get old and when it's time for them to receive what they have done before, then you know what they have done so far. The life was not easy for them. So what are the means that I can be happy, or what are the means that I can protect myself from suffering? So knowing them precisely in terms of method, we say they know the proper ways, or they have a proper understanding of the law. The happiness that we want, it is not happiness. It is not only my happiness that you achieve from ignoring others and also troubling others and lying to others. So gaining happiness through others' unhappiness is never possible and it is never acceptable. That is something that can never make you happy. If you have business and when you sell something in the market, maybe the things that he brought from to sell might be of a good quality, and by selling the stuff, maybe he'll be able to pay taxes and also get his salary out of it. There will be no bad effect coming after him. But then if you, or maybe if he had cheated the product that he was selling, or maybe if he's selling bad things like drugs or cigarettes or alcohols, and if he sells the things that the other person might become unhappy, and that if you get profit out of it, and if you think you'll be free, never think of it. When I say things like this, then people just keep arguing to me that this is the whole world, but you just try to look at it in a phenomenal part. Just by selling few bottles of soju, you could also be committing murder in an indirect way. When I say the ultimate truth, it doesn't mean for my survival, this is something that you have to do inevitably, and things that which is not the ultimate truth or the proper path, you should not follow them. Then you become happy and others also become happy, giving up something. I was very embarrassed and ashamed on TV the time they were talking about the poll, and so there were some arguments about it, and I don't remember which position he held at the time, but they tried to interview him, and I think he's a populist, but he said we should also survive. We should also have something to survive on, but there is not something. You did not become a monk in order to make profit out of it. You became monk because even if there is nothing to eat or even a bare bowl of rice, you'll be content. That's why you became a monk. So someone said, in some temples there are about 100,000 tourists, and so if you just collect $7 from each person, it becomes a lot of money. But then think about it. For 1 year. For 1 year, you have collected that kind of money, and then think about it. If you have to pay back, which you have earned for 10 years, that means you have to work really hard to pay it off. If you think about it in depth, then there's something that's behind it. If you try to become happy depending on other people's unhappiness, think about it this way. If you say go and give me a bottle of water, the bottle of alcohol, but then on the other hand, you're trying to put the shop owner or the owner of the shop to the hell. Why are you trying to put someone else in the hell? Is it something that someone who studies should do? You ask for money, but then you never think about the consequences that she has to pay. So you have to think of them in depth, and you also have to observe from afar things that we do in our life. We put so many different people into hell. It's almost like, the manhole, the sewage holes. It's almost like, if you step on it without the cover, then you feel deep into it. It's almost like you're putting a trap for everyone. There's something that we cannot do. This is also quite interesting. The clothes we wear, and there are brands for the clothes. Like the jacket that he wore, Yu Byung-on, $10,000. But that was made in Bangladesh, where they don't pay even $10 for a month. Last time they had the house broke down, and so a lot of people died. And it's almost like the shop that we had in Korea before. you should know this, how much they suffer, and how much they try in order to survive. A lot of multinational companies, they invest their money in Bangladesh in order to make profits. They make more floors, they make more stores and more floors in order to put more people in it. And so because the ceilings are so low, people cannot really walk. They have to bend their bodies. And also, those people who work there, they have the problem with the pride. Why do they have to do this? Or imagine they're so dusty because of the clothes. There's no mask to protect themselves, and also they and also there's no filter in order to remove the dust. They are just unprotected, and their bodies are bent. It's the same place like our Cheonggyecheon area, the place which broke down right now in Bangladesh. They don't even pay $10 a month. But on the other hand, we get around 20 to 30,000. And also they don't help people who work there or who are the families, but instead they pay millions of dollars to pay for their cars, and also they borrow their own private jet. But those people, they are really doing harsh things for humankind. How is that living with everyone else with bearing for their happiness? It is not so. When you pray, please, repenting how selfish you have been living so far, that is a prayer. I will not live in a selfish way from now on, but I will live for the others. That is the prayer. Other than that, there is no other prayer. Then only me, myself, also my family, and also my close ones, they will be removing themselves from the suffering, or else everything else is not a prayer. When I tell you to do so, you don't do so because your habit is so in depth. You are grateful that they gave you food. I'm so grateful that you gave me great food to eat. And so this precious food, I will try to save it and share with other people who are in need. At least even in Christian, the prayer, thank you for giving us the food. It becomes a prayer only if it says that you share with someone else and also you give up your grief. But I have never seen a prayer like that. You might seem happy at the time being, but the result is pessimistic. Although the Dalai Lama has spoken in a very gentle way, those people like John Tae-yeol who made the cloth before in Cheonggyecheon area, if you say who were happy because of the unhappiness of the laborers, if you say who sucked their blood and they were rich and also they had a good life, think about it. Who were those who were benefited from it? I cannot tolerate that on my own, not yet. So those of you from maybe in some certain aspect, whether it's you or whether it's me, the more that you like a brand, when you buy and wear a brand, then we should also have this kind of saying.
반발을 붙여야 돼. 왜냐면 나는 그 생각을 해.
If some companies they donate about 10% of the profit from this, if there's a brand like that, then I think it's fine that we purchase those products. But there isn't one, the rich. You try to cheat them, and from the rich people, you try to get more money out of it.
부자들 잘살 부추겨가지고 그 못난 것들을 전부 다
You encourage them to buy something more expensive. Those people who have complexes in between them.
나는 우리나라가 그런 걸 따지고 그 전부 다 역대가 돼버렸으면 좋겠어. 그냥 난 이거 하나만 입고 살게.
If the weather is so hot like nowadays, then people just want to wear a very mild or very thin clothes. And
뭐한 3천원짜리 난 이거
in Thailand or Vietnam, they don't pay much for their clothes.
별로 안 들어갔대. 반바지 입고 그냥 다니까.
The best way to gain happiness that we desire is to think about other people's profit prior to mine. You know, countries like in America, when they first make the first product or the program,
그 물건을 만들거나 그 프로그램을 만들 때
they argue whether it's profitable to those who use them, and also then it goes to the company, and then later they will pay abundant tax, and so they will try to build the social infrastructure for the society.
그런 회사일수록 잘 된다.
This is the good way where it should be working out. So even if you do not practice the conscious practice for the religion,
하지 않더라도
if you're able to depend on each other, and if you have a proper understanding of the life that we have to depend on each other, then you can achieve happiness and also balance and also peace in this world.
이스라엘 수상 이름이 뭐더라? 무슨 개떡 같은 놈 무슨
The Israel issue nowadays is causing a lot of havoc in our society.
엄청 깡패도 그런 깡패 어디 있어? 뭐 핵무기까지 갖고 있는 깡패가 막
To those who are not even
안돼 있는 사람
who are not even military, and also those who were not having proper things to fight back.
진짜
They have
이게 이제 얼마나 나는 그
they have tried to ruin their life.
사람들이 어리석다라고 생각하느냐? 저거하고 팔레스타인하고 연관이 없다라고 생각해. 그러니까 그 팔레스타인 그 사람들 갖다
Making about 2,000 casualties
그 2,000명 사상자를 내놓고
in Palestine, they just removed themselves from the area of Palestine.
얼마나
They have bombed
강연에서
the school that's organized by United Nations and killed a lot of people.
이런 상황을 만든다. 근데 그거
It's almost like if you have 5 fingers here,
다섯 개 있으면 손가락 요 손가락은 이
that means if you bite this finger,
깨물어서 피를 나게 해도 아무 상관이 없다는 뜻이야.
if you bite this finger, then this finger hurts, and so
이 손가락도 아파.
although you feel that fingers are not interconnected, they are all connected. If you bite this finger, then the other finger also hurts.
연관관계가 다 있다라는 거
But they don't know that if Palestine is unhappy, Israel will be unhappy too. This
팔레스타인 불행이지만
imagine, or let's say, if you kill all Palestinians, do you think the world will just leave them as they are? Even now, everyone is condemning Israel for what they have done. And nowadays, they also say, if you say you're Israeli, then while having food with you, while dining with you, they just stand up and leave the place. That is something that is not acceptable. You should not try to become happy through other people's unhappiness.
남의 불행을 통해서 어떻게 내가 행복해질 거라고 생각합니다. 전에 내가 이제 뭔 방송 종편에서
Before, I used to watch the program I'm going to meet now, and I used to watch that because I was wondering how people in North Korea lives. But then, but in the end, they were trying to just increase the viewers by trying to show how bad their lives were, and what are we there to be happy about it? That North Korea is unhappy or they're going through a very poor life. If they live a poor life, there's more chances of war with them.
옛날에는 이랬으면 보안법이 걸렸었거든.
So we live a life that is all interconnected.
그러니까 전부 다 우리는
There is no being in this world that is independent. We are social animals. Even for a moment, without help from others or cooperation from others, it's unacceptable to think that you live an isolated life. Living an isolated life is impossible, but if you say that you are being isolated from the natural environments like air, without air you cannot live even for 30 seconds. Even water, you cannot live more than 3 days. And also food. If you're being isolated from food or plant, you cannot live. Even from the land, you cannot live. Do you think you can live in space if you are being isolated from the land? You cannot. Even people, even our relationship with others. If you say you can live without anyone, that is very foolish idea. How can you live without anyone? The clothes that you are wearing right now is also made by someone else. And also tofu. If you eat tofu, then think about how many people are involved. If you think about how the way tofus are being made. And that's why if you say everyone who is related to me have the poor sense of study, that means that person will also be destroyed. So this world is all interconnected and everyone is related. It's related between human and also animals. That's why even a small animal or even the natural environment, if you think you will be happy after destroying them, then that is a big mistake. The very basic understanding of Buddhism is that there is no independent being. So someone might say, go to Suyang Mountain, and because the king died because of coup, and if you think you can survive by going back to the mountain, then people can also say, isn't the plant that he was feeding himself on doesn't belong to the king? Why did he eat that? So between the parent and child, we know that there is a very related or deep root or relation between them, and also so as a siblings. But if you say it is your neighbor or if your country, or then you just say we have no relation. And also even if the shape is different, for the Caucasians, the blacks, they work as slave and they try their best, but the whites or the Caucasians, they might say what is our relation with them. So the saying that red India and blacks, the country like America, which are starting on the blood of red Indians and also blacks, they are going through a very dangerous result. But Han dynasty, they never really tried to demolish certain certain race. So I don't think there will be a chance where the country itself breaks down. We have not done that. And when you look at it, I feel a little sense of relief. I don't think there will be a great consequences for our actions. But then we fight against each other, and a lot of people can die. And that is also something that's very serious. Without help or cooperation from others, you cannot live even for a short time. Whatever we do, whether it's the farmer or businessman, we all depend on others. We depend on each other and then we survive. It looks like kids are very dependent on the parents, but parents they also depend on their children. So it's never one-sided. So before Buddha compare, in olden times we'll cut the rice and then we will make it stand. And during this time we would put one against the another and make them stand. But if we have only one of them, then one of them will just fall down. Because there are two of them, they are dependent on each other and they stand. So it is depending on each other. There is no reliance which is one-sided. Also, when you help those who are poor, you feel that a person is dependent on you 100% because you're helping the other, but it is not so. You're dependent on your giving away, depending on the other person. If there's no that person to receive, then there is no place for you to give. That's why everyone is dependent on each other. So if all of them are not happy, then you cannot be happy too. And that is everything about how everything is existing in this world. Even families, they depend on each other and they survive. And that's why people live together with their friends or even family. Of course, there are some exceptions. There are also some saints or practitioners who live on a high mountain and also deep valleys, in deep valleys, practicing their spirituality. So even those practitioners, although they say they live a quite independent life, it is also not possible without this understanding that they are also relying on others. Because they are social animals, it is true that we depend on others, and that's why if you want the true happiness and peace, then you should also have interest and affection on other people's happiness or profit. So in order to make everyone happy in this world, the happiness is given as the basis, and when you are trying to give them the profit, in olden time, just like us, if you say when you're giving a present, you give them an alcohol or a cigarette, that is not giving them profit. What is it? You give them damage. You give them something so that they would die. But because you are ignorant, we give them this in order to give them profit, but then in the end it's almost like you are causing them damage. So it's almost like you buy honey from Nepal and they have no issue if they eat it, but from what we know is from the mushroom. The preservatives from mushroom, the bees take them and they put it, and it's a poisonous mushroom. if they put that in the honey, then the honey doesn't rot very well. And those Nepalis, they are already used to it, but Koreans, we are not used to it. It's good for health, but in Korea, we tell you not to eat the honey from Nepal. Even those who are viewing this do not eat it.
석청 먹지 마시오. 요 인터넷 보는 사람들도 절대 먹지 마. 옆에 사람들이.
Even if you eat like 100 milliliter, you will die because of the paralysis, heart attack.
그냥 심장에 마비가 일어나.
If you are ignorant, if there is no wisdom, then even if it's something that you pray for better or betterment, you die in the end. I think about 3 monks died after eating the honey that were offered by their believers.
스님도 3명인가 죽었어.
The difference between the medicine and poison lies in the wisdom. If you have wisdom, it becomes medicine. If there is no wisdom, it becomes poison.
그게 보약이 되고.
That's how the world works. Even the food, if you eat more food when you're full, it becomes poison. But then if you eat, if you're hungry, that becomes your medicine. Isn't it so?
볼 때 먹으면 보약이죠. 예?
Those people who are ugly, then what happens? If those people who are ugly and if they wear makeup, what happens?
사람이 화장을 넣으면 뭐가 되나? 예?
Those who are ugly and if they wear too heavy makeup, then when they do not wear makeup, then we don't recognize your face. That's why it becomes a poison.
그러니까 뭐 그건
So without wisdom, so when we do something,
그 지혜가 없으면
the wisdom in this world,
그러니까 우리가 이제 뭐를 할 때 이
there is no wisdom which arises from 100% truth, because the knowledge,
진리로서의 지식
because the knowledge, it could be right at some point of time, but it could also be different on some other place.
여기 가면 아니야.
For example, if you say boo in Africa, it could be means hello, but in our country, you might be beaten to death. So during the Olympic back in 1988, a lot of women who used to come and not wear clothes and they would dance, and a lot of people.
그저 운동장에 나왔다가 우리나라 신문에서 다 욕을 해놨더니
It was in autumn, so because in those who didn't wear much clothes and came to dance, they don't have so much they don't have so much sun shown in their country, so they were so happy to receive the sunlight from our country.
나가서 옥상에 올라갔어요.
So even in their country, even if they are in the office, if they see sunlight, then they run out to greet them. But in our country, if you say, I see the sun, so let's take a day off, you might suffer a lot. So even the knowledge, it is something that happens because of a phenomena, but it itself is not true, or it itself is not absolute.
그거 자체가 진리는 아니란 말이야.
That's why if you have a proper wisdom and also proper knowledge,
이게 제대로 지혜가 있고 지식이 제대로
then they also know how futile the education or the knowledge or wisdom is. So from Dongguk University, they went for medical volunteer, and so they gave medicines for the ulcers and also other health problems.
장약을 주고 이제 침을 주고 뭐 뜸을 주고
And they said not to eat the flour and make rice porridge and eat it. But when you look at them on their face, then it seems like they don't understand, and they were not nodding their head. Instead, they were slanting their head. And when I listened to them carefully, I thought they were wrong because
그냥 가만히 들어보니까 틀렸어.
they cannot digest rice if they eat it. So if they have ulcer, then they eat tentu, which is like a stew made of wheat. So this is their habit. So while looking at them, if you say, "Oh, they're so strange. They have problem with your stomach and they eat wheat," if you say so, that means that becomes something that is not tolerable or accepted in their country. When I went to Spiti and checked, if you say those people they don't wash your hair, and but then if I take you there, then it will take less than a year for you to become the same. Why is it so? The temperature falls below 40 degrees in winter, and where will you go and wash your hair? The water, when it comes down the pipe, then it, it freezes on its way, and and even the metal, if it's 40 degrees below Celsius, then they freeze and they break eventually. And from October, November, December, it takes them about 7 months to come back to their life. All the plants and others. And where will you go and wash your hair? There is no oil to burn and warm up the water, and there is no wood too because it's very cold, and also there's not much cows too because the weather is too cold, so you cannot wash your hair. But when we went, the water was not frozen, and also it was early autumn, so through the valley, a lot of people. Through the valley, there was a lady washing her hair, and so I wanted to go and wash my hand, but I was really, really, really surprised because the water was very cold. So there's no place to wash your hair too, and but but if you say they don't wash their hair, and if you say bad things about it, then one of the monks said, Tibetan monks they are not hygienic, and they are this is against the rules and regulations. But I asked them what is that so, and he said they don't shave their hair. They cannot shave their hair like us, because the head will also freeze. Because the temperature is too cold, they grow certain length of the hair, so it's different. But different doesn't mean it is wrong. So if you want everyone to become like happy, then that is not acceptable. Yu say he's like a god, but then if you and also they said I'm following Yu Byung-hun, that's why I'm doing this. But then if that's so, then Yu Byung-hun died in middle of this forest, then you can also follow. Look at animals or birds in the wild. They move together and they make their own habitat together and they help each other and they live on. Also, if you give an example of honeybees, then they have their own biomes, and this means they are dependent on each other, and this is the life of nature. I know birds really well. I also know ants. Bees, they have worker bees. If you divide it in a big way, then they have female and they also have males, and they have cleaners, they have workers, they have queens, they also have guards. Amongst the male, they only have one kind. Their job is to mate with the queen bee. On a fine day, queen bee, when she's born, she will rise up to the very top of the sky, and male bees they will follow her, and
교미를 해. 나머지 못 올라가는 데는 이제 내려와서 집에 들어오면 다
maybe they
그냥
follow
뺑뺑이를
her
죽여.
to the sky, and whoever rises to the top, she'll mate with the male bee, and those who comes back. And those who comes back without mating all the girl bees, they will kill the male bees.
다 죽고 두드러 맞아 죽고 한 마리나 두 마리 아 밑에
There are a lot of bees who are dead,
밑에 숯볼 때는 수십 마리 죽어요.
when the queen bee comes back. So about like only two survives,
다 죽어버려.
and even those two bees who have survived, they just do nothing, just like our human.
남자들 돈 안 벌고 빈둥빈둥
They cannot even fight well, and they just roam around doing nothing.
싸움도 잘 못하고 빈둥빈둥 하고 돌아다녀. 그러다 이제
But the queen bee, when she mates once,
여왕벌은
then she lays eggs until she dies.
그 알을 낳아. 죽을 때까지.
And she can have millions of eggs. So the queen bee lays so many eggs, and near the queen bee,
그러면
there be guards following her.
그 호위 군사 요즘 우리 같은 근위병들이 따라다녀. 물러거라 그러면서 따라다녀. 그럼 그놈들이 탁 보면 벌써 여왕벌 옆에 서 있는 놈들은
If you
덩치도 좋고 앞에 이빨 이런 부분이 빨갛빨갛.
if you check those bees who are near the queen bee, they're bigger in body, and also if you look at them, their mouth it's also reddish color, and they look very strong. And when they move around, it's almost like they're asking you to move aside. But the workers,
그 방을 갖다가
they do a lot of cleaning, they do all the work.
내고 이제 청소 다 해. 그리고 이제 왕 옆에
And there's also a bee which makes the food for the queen bee.
그 왕 먹이를 만드는 벌은 이 벌의 여기 안에 이 더듬이 같은 게 있죠. 요걸 데시선이라 그래. 여기서 그 꿀을 자기가 먹고서
From the queen bee, those who makes the food for the queen bee, they produce a royal jelly just like a frog.
로얄 젤리를
They produces milk, and it's the royal jelly, and that's a very high quality protein. And so
그래서 이제 사람이 이제 깨가
people tend to make
여왕벌 집처럼 자꾸 만들어 가지고
people tend to make something that looks like a fake queen bee's house, and they make them to produce the royal jelly, and then we steal them and eat it.
몰래 훔쳐 먹는 거야.
But the
그런 이제 병정벌들은 얘들이 다 앞에서 이제 그 다른
but the guards, they protect the colony, and they're well trained. So if one of them bites, then you should be prepared that they will sting you. So if you say it's the first party, then they know that you are the target, and they'll follow you, and they will sting you, and they'll die. They will give up their life to do their job. And the left ones are the workers. They fly up to 2 kilometers, and they get the honey, and they come back with the honey, and near the legs, on the legs they would have the pollens, and they will fly.
차고서 이제 날아와. 그러면 날아와가지고 그 많이
Those workers who have a lot of honey, and they would fall because it's so heavy. Then when they come, they have the gatekeepers,
그 앞에 이제 문지기벌이 딱 있어.
and there are also some bees which don't work, and they just go around here and there.
꼭 그래도 멍팽이가 있거든.
She's a worker bee, but she doesn't work, and she moves around.
왔다 갔다 요것만
And while moving away, she will also eat the honey, and she will not do work, and she'll just fly around. And there will be gatekeepers who will be standing on top, and they would just observe.
이렇게 뜨면서 이게
And if you get caught, then they will attack the bees who doesn't do anything,
바로 전부 다
and they will kill them. It's almost like going to prison.
그러니 우리 같으면 이제 감옥을 보내버리는 거지.
What do you think? If you have only the workers left out, they cannot survive, and so is the guards, so is the queen bees.
못 살아.
Why? Because they cannot get fed on their own.
왜 먹이도 못
And also the male bees.
그러잖아요.
If you do not have them all together, but if you have them separately, they will all die.
빼놓으면
No, none of them can live an independent life. That's why even the guard bees, with your life, with your death,
영정벌도 내가 죽음으로써
they are protecting the whole colony.
한 생명체로 보고서 살리는 거야.
You understand? But when you look at humans, because we have our own consciousness, which says I, you feel that you can live alone, but that is misunderstanding. That is worse than a beast.
착각을 하는 게 벌보다도 못하단 말이야.
Whereas they don't come and do illegal things.
벌은 와가
When they come,
축제를 절대 안 해.
after getting honey, and while they're eating, they mix their propolis.
이 먹으면서 벌써 안에다가 뭘 섞느냐면 프로폴리스 있죠, 그죠?
You know the bitter black liquid. While eating it and while flying, they would mix it in their stomach. And when they come out, they will mix it together and then they mix it together and then they vomit. That's the antibiotics, natural antibiotics. But if you look at inside the beehive, then but then there is never a case where the worker bees hide some of the honey for them. So that's better than human.
사람보다 낫죠? 예. 사람보다 훨씬 낫죠?
There is also no difference between your honey and my honey, and they work hard and they will have more bees and they will make their own colony. It's ends are similar. So in the colony, depending on everyone's job, workers bees have to work hard in order to make a living, and as the guards and also the queen bee. Do you know how do they kill? Do you know how do they kill the wasps? They're much bigger in size than the honeybees. Their clothes, if I give a metaphorical example, it's like a scissor, and they will cut the bodies of the honeybees. And there is no way where the honeybees can survive, even if it's a guard. But the wasp or the hornet, they cannot survive the warmth or the heat, and they die in the heat because they cannot bear it. So even if so many of them are being killed by the wasp, a lot of bees, they gather together and they shake their body and they produces heat. They produces the heat, and the wasp, they die inside because they are not able to bear it and they are not able to breathe. And so in order to save the colony, hundreds of bees, they give up their life. You know, in our military,
우리 군대 있죠, 그죠? 군대 60만 군대가 5천만을 위해서.
You know, the military, for our people, we have produced the organization called military and army. So we can never live an independent life. Our society is never in that system. So everyone is interrelated, and in this interrelated life, we should not think selfish way, and we should also be selfless. Then only everyone can survive and everyone can live in happiness. And this is also a very basic condition for happiness. And that's Mayana. There's nothing special or there's nothing new being made in Mayana. We follow the natural laws, and depending on the natural laws, we become happy. We are talking about the system of happiness. just like honeybee has given up given up their themselves in order to make everyone happy and where everyone survive. But if you look at male bees, you might think that they're foolish, but it is not so. They have done their work, and they also understand that if they survive, then they will only be eating the honey. And the stingers of the male bees, they have deteriorated, so they do not really it's not really useful. So through the evolution, there is not something that they can do much to the family, and so that is that has become like a reality for them. It is very precise, and so male bees, they are also sacrificing themselves for their own family. So if you observe the bees in detail, then you can know that they live a very good life. And how do they manage to live such a good life? And sometimes I think if they have intelligence, I think maybe they're better than human, and maybe also they're following the true path of Mayana. That's what I think. For the happiness of everyone, they sacrifice and they give up, and the, starting from the queen bee to the workers and even the guards and also the male bees, they sacrifice themselves. So for the happiness of others, if you live on, then it is the selfless happiness gives happiness to everyone, but selfish happiness doesn't give happiness to everyone. So if you want myself to be happy, then you should make others happy too. Then you will be happy too. And this we call Mayana. You understand? Let's end today.